The Hub.
It's HubCityDre with the Hub Radio, and we are doing an exclusive interview with candidate of District 64 Assembly, Ms. Fatima Iqbal-Zubair. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on here again. I wish we were like in the studio, but times are different.
Right, we are in the pandemic era now,
Mm.
which was quite different from when we first started off. About it, almost it might have been about a year ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did our first interview. We're in the
Yeah.
studio, and then the primaries hit. You guys go into the runoff. COVID hits at the same time, and I'm sure it changed up how you campaigned.
Yeah.
Want to tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about campaigning during COVID, or the
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, yeah, like our strength was really in like talking to the voters. That's what I really enjoy doing. That's where I learned a lot about Compton and the district. I really miss that. I mean, right now, yeah, the way it's changed is a couple of things. Back in the primary, I was going to a lot of community meetings and things like that. I'm still doing some of that now. Um, but we can't knock on doors, right? So we've been phone banking. That's the best next thing to knock on doors. We've been doing some text banking. Um, and and I've been also fundraising more. I think that's why we've been able to send out mailers, which are, by the way, really expensive. For anyone that doesn't know, it's about 35,000 to send out one mailer, not even to the whole district. So that's one mailer. So whenever you see, this is a good tip, whenever you see those politicians sending out a lot of mailers, you gotta question how they got that much money and where that came from. It's just something to think about. Because I saw a comment the other day on a Come to Compton Rest, oh, we should get real mail instead of calls. The ones that send out real mail are usually the most corrupt ones because they are getting money from all sorts of places. Anyway, so but we fundraise some money to send out some mail. It won't match what Gibson can send out because we're not corporate funded, but I spend a lot more time fundraising because I know if a lot is at stake. We see what's happening with the pandemic, with the police brutality, with all these issues that need to be dealt with that aren't being dealt with by our current, you know, assembly person, our current legislature. So I am so I knew that to get to the place that I can actually be a force to win this election, I had to raise a certain amount of money, and it's harder because I had to call individuals like you, right? I had to call supporters to ask for those small donations, but it's just so inspiring to see pages and pages of individual donors. In fact, I think 99% of our donations are from individuals. Gibson's is like 2%, 1%, not even. But yeah, so it's been a lot of that. We've been phone banking, text banking, like I said. My team is also much more robust. We actually have folks that have run campaigns. So I think of myself in the primary as an amateur. Now I kind of have I'm the same Fatima. I'm still, rooted in as a teacher, rooted in living in Carson and with my son. I'm still that same mom, I'm still the same person, but I kind of have, I've kind of explained, I've kind of learned the ropes a little more. So I kind of know what it takes to win. And we've been doing some of those things and making sure we have the funds to win, making sure we have the people power to win. So doing the right things, trying to do the right things.
So runoff campaigning has been a little more smooth per se than primary uh, campaigning.
Yeah. And it really, like, I wish we were able to knock on doors. I mean, a grassroots campaign like ours, that's our strength. We have volunteers. But I'm always optimistic. It's whatever, we're in this situation and we're going to make the best of it. So,
So last we talked about this campaign, uh, the district faced certain issues, certain challenges, and I ask now, months later, pandemic, you know, months into the pandemic, are some of the needs and challenges still the same as they were 1 year ago?
when I started this campaign, I talked about, that we're here to break the chains of systemic racism. We're here to break the chains of classism. We're for the working class, people of color. That message hasn't changed. I definitely feel like Compton's always been awake. Watts has always been awake. It's not that they're waking up, but I feel like the rest of the world is now in line. You know what I mean? Like America is now in line with our communities. Um, and I think that's what's different. So I think our message as a whole has been the same. I would always have been for, divesting funds into away from policing and into our community, in the schools, and I would have always been for a decarceration budget, that's not focusing so much on incarceration. I would have always been for those things. But now the state has caught up with it. We have allies. We have our white allies standing next to us, doing this. So the needs of the district haven't changed, Andre. I feel like, honestly, can I be honest? Because we've had, living in we've had police brutality, we've had shootings happen. We like,
Mhm.
of our
Certainly
black
does.
boys and our but we've had like these things have not stopped. I mean, the Watts riots was in the '60s, it was in the '90s, like, it's happened. But I think what's happening now, if I can say it, is almost like an awakening of the country and the world, right? I mean, sure, like your perspective as a black man would be interesting as well. But from my perspective, running, that's what I'm seeing, like that it's been happening, which is that people are more now allies of us, understanding what's happening, and hopefully that means that we see change. So I think things like environmental racism have been happening before and after in my district. Things like police brutality have been happening. The policing in schools has been happening. The high rents have been happening. Now we're just feeling it more because of COVID. People are losing jobs, and people are more aware of, like, wow, we have a real housing problem. Now we're seeing, um, you know we're seeing what's happening with the protests, and that's even amplified, and now the whole world is waking up. It's not like our communities didn't know what was happening, but now the whole world is trying to be our ally, which is great because we can have change, right? Finally, this pressure is important. Now, we're talking about the intersection of environmental racism, right? I talked about this from the beginning, but we are seeing how racism in the black community is intersectional. It's about, like, what happened in Compton with the chemical spill, what's happening in the water situation. That's related to what's happening to the community in terms of police brutality, in terms of the quality of schools, right? It's intersectional, and I'm almost glad, like, we're talking about it. What I'm sad about, though, the one thing that's changed is that, it's bringing up the gaps in our system. Like with the pandemic, we're seeing who's dying from COVID. It's places like Compton, Watts, and these communities of color that are struggling more. When we see who's struggling with not having Wi-Fi at home with schools, right? We're seeing, okay, there's a lack of Wi-Fi. There's Wi-Fi issues, and it's low-income communities that are struggling. So that makes me sad in a sense. But I guess the icing on the cake is people are really seeing the systemic issues. They're like it's kind of like ripping the band-aid off for everyone else. It's like black people always knew, right? Brown people always knew in our district. But now, like, people, like, the world is seeing. And so I hope that means we're going to get change in some of the policies we have.
You know what I said to some friends a while back? I said, this isn't new information. This isn't a new space that we're in. The only thing that's changed is that the pandemic has made you sit yourself at home. You can't go to a football game.
Right.
You can't go to a baseball game, basketball game.
Mhm.
You can't take your mind off of this by going to the club or to the bar. You have to sit here and see it with your own eyes, whether that be the George Floyd situation, whether that be the several riots or all these different things. You can't help but to see it now. There's no way to ignore it. And so now, I'm grateful for the pandemic for reasons like that. But that's just on a personal note. Um, Now we talked a little bit about some of your challenges as an underdog, and the main challenge has been finances. And being an underdog, keeping up with the big dog, it's money.
Yeah.
Um, so aside from the mailers, how are you combating uh, the slope that you're in, the
Yeah.
financial slope that you're in?
Yeah. I want to throw in this. Like, I don't know if you've been following national politics, the victory of Cory Bush, Jamal Bowman,
Mm-hmm.
right, have been so inspiring. Cory Bush, I mean, is an activist. Imagine having an activist in Congress. I just want to shout out Cory Bush and Jamal Bowman being a high school principal, right? And I mean, so I think what's happening is, like, I mean, I have so much respect for them. But I would like to think what's happening in movements like ours, and what I can relate what we're doing to what they're doing, is they were doing the same thing. They were challenging an incumbent, the big dogs, right? And they were the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
How did they make it happen? I mean, it was just inspiring a lot of people to volunteer to phone bank. I mean, it sounds simple, but just getting people talking to voters is a big difference. Because they
Yeah.
were outraged too, but it's that conversation can't beat a mailer. You know what I mean? That conversation can't be, I don't know, like, it can't be even name recognition. You know what I'm saying? Like, we talk about, yes, he has more name recognition, but when you have a conversation with someone, that beats someone having more name recognition. So I think, that's how we do it. I mean, that's how we've been trying to do it, and hopefully, like Cory Bush, like Jamal Bowman, like AOC did it, like Ayanna Presley did it, right? Like, I mean, in these big dog, underdog versus big dog races, it's possible. And you see the change they're able to do, right, when they're unbought. I mean, it's right. I mean, that's why they're so famous, and some hate them so much because they just listen to the people. I mean, because they're not bought out. But that's what we've been doing. So not just mailers. Mailers are for name recognition, right? We need that. I mean, it works, unfortunately, right? People see mail, they still read, especially the older folks, right? They read mail, you know. But we also send postcards, Andre. That's something special that we've been doing. We've been had volunteers write 35,000 postcards that we sent out. Isn't that amazing? You might get one. We'll see. Yeah, but we're putting them to voters who haven't voted yet, undecided voters. Phone banking, text banking, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, like I mean, it's just
Okay.
we've been trying to just have that relationship with the voter, make it personal. You know, like even a postcard is more personal than a mailer if someone wrote something to you, right? So trying to make it a little more personal, and that's the way we hope voter by voter will convince the district. You know, so
Now, okay, switching lanes a little bit here, going more into the job. So, one of the responsibilities as the California State Assembly is to pass legislative bills. Um, the incumbent, Mike Gibson, has been there for, I think, a couple terms now. Can you give an example of a legislative bill that he may have passed that you would not necessarily support?
yeah, yeah. So the way I address this question is this, right? We have, just to give someone, and I have a great video about that I made about this, about what the assembly does, because a lot of people don't know the power of it, right? But it's literally like our Congress for California. We make laws. And so in California, we have a supermajority of Democrats. That's what it means, that we have a Democratic majority in our assembly, Democratic majority in our Senate, and our governor, Gavin Newsom, is a Democrat, which is great. So my issue with legislation is I'm not going to, say that anything Mike Gibson voted for necessarily is bad, because in general it's a Democratic, bill, right? It's I mean it's okay. The issue with the legislature though is that there's a failure of a lot of bills that don't pass because of special interests. So Andre, what would happen is that there'd be a good bill, on the environment, on housing, that where, we'll have a certain group of Democrats, including Mike Gibson, vote absent on it, right? Or vote no, but more vote absent, so they don't take a stand on it, and the bill doesn't have enough votes to pass. So that's more my issue with him, is that he has, I mean, if you go to MikeGibson'sRecord.com, I don't can't name one bill, there's a lot, but there's a lot of bills he voted absent on, and so because of his absent vote, the bill didn't pass a lot of times, right?
So a lot of times
And
that he could have stepped up where he didn't.
you just vote yes on the right. And you know what's sad is that sometimes when if he voted absent, the bill might have gotten enough votes to pass. But if you think about what that means, Andre, it means that he's a representative for the district, and let's say it was a criminal justice bill or something, he's saying that he doesn't value our black and brown boys if he voted absent. The bill may have passed, right? But by voting absent, he's not representing the district's interests. So
Hmm.
I find that just on a conceptual level, theoretical level, I find that just immoral. But that's what happens. You have these lobbyists, you have your corporate donors on speed dial, and that's who you're listening to. That's what he's done. And so that's my issue, in that he's voted absent on so many bills that have prevented from passing. One example of this that I want to talk about um, is, SB 731. Right, so this is a criminal justice bill. It didn't even really get to the floor, but from the people that sponsored the bill, that authored the bill, people close the floor. I trust them. I trust the youth activists. I trust the people fighting for criminal justice. What I hear is Gibson, blocked the bill in committee, slowed it down. Essentially, it didn't bring it to the floor. Yes, he supported at the very end when there was no chance of it even passing. Um, but I want to set the record straight, because it's not that, oh my gosh, this bill didn't pass, we'll try to do it again. No, this is all a lie. When SB 731 would have ended qualified immunity in our state, which means that it would have had police officers accountable, right? It would have released their records sooner when they were involved in a shooting. It's about justice. It's about That's
Mm.
what it's about. And he was, key in not bringing that bill to the floor. And this is not from my voice. This is not me trying to slander him. This is from the activists that were fighting for it. These are from the lawyers that have tried to represent young black men that
Why
have
did
come
you
to this.
feel like he didn't support? And this is, and I know you wouldn't know for a fact. This is just an educated guess.
Yeah. Actually, I say it's a fact. I'm gonna say it's a fact.
Okay.
Because when we follow Gibson's votes, Andre, it's so crazy how they will get money. Him and politicians like him will get money, and they'll change their vote. Okay, so I will say it is because he's tied to the police unions. I'm going to bring up, for example, okay, he released a chokehold bill. It's all over his mailers, everything. I want to set the record straight on that. It's not that it's a bad bill. I just feel like it doesn't go far enough. It's like 3% of what we need to change criminal justice. You know what I mean? That's what my issue is with that. I'm not saying it should have been included in a bill. Like, yes, it's great. I know how George Floyd died. It was very inhumane. Here's my issue with this. I'm a science teacher, and the chokehold ban that he has wanted to have all of California has been implemented, Andre, in all major police departments. It's led to almost no reduction
Mhm.
in accountability, in even deaths. You know why? Because you can ban the chokehold, but even if an officer does it, if you think about it, if an officer does the chokehold, Andre, right? How will that officer be held accountable? See, that's where the issue is, right? So these major police departments, like the Chicago police departments, like LAP, that passed the chokehold ban that Gibson passed, hasn't worked. So it's not that I think it's a bad bill. I just think it's a, can I say it? It's like, oh, look, I did something for Black Lives bill. And it's not something that will do that. So look, let's pass a chokehold ban statewide. But what we should do is end qualified immunity, pass independent oversight committees, right? These are large reforms that will actually change the lives of Black and Brown communities. And so you ask me why. We're looking at the DA race right between Jackie Lacey and George Gaston. We're looking at a lot of the state legislatures that's not passed. We're looking at Compton City Council that didn't pass this oversight bill. It's likely happening because the influence of the sheriff's department and in the money they're giving to these politicians. There's fear in voting against them and in not getting reelected, in whatever it is. But I really think it's related to money. It's related to money in politics and the power of the police unions, the police packs. I mean, Gibson's is takes a fifth or sixth most in police money, you know and so that is the issue. This is not an educated guess. This is what's been happening because we can see data of how politicians get funds and what they don't vote on. I mean, it's easy to see the connection.
So now, speaking of criminal justice, there's obviously been an uprising in social justice issues as it relates to uh, Black and Brown communities and the inequalities that's going on over
Yeah,
there. Do you have any new plans or recommendations to address these uh, inequities
I
in
do.
these Black and Brown communities?
I do. This may take a few minutes. This might be because that's a lot. Okay. This has been, Ari, when I started my campaign, my whole thing was break the chains of systemic racism, right? That's why I ran. I mean, I understood, I'm not a Black person, but I understood what my students went through. The
Mhm.
police brutality in the community of Watts. That's where I worked, and I saw that also when I was canvassing what families talked about the policing in schools and things like that. Um, I want to first just start with where we're at a little bit, and then talk about why we're not doing enough, and how politicians aren't addressing the moment like they should. So, just want to reiterate: we had three Black boys, three no, let me say that two Black boys, one Latino boy in our district. Dijon Kesey was a little bit outside our district, a block though, but still in South LA.
Mhm.
And we had Frederick and we had Andres Guardado, right? I don't
Right.
want us to forget their names because there's too many. And I want people to know, like, this happened in our district. Three shootings in the past 2, 3 months in our district. And you're telling me that racism may not exist? Well, not that no one's saying that, but you're not acting like it exists, is my issue in what you're doing and in what legislators are doing. I want to mention a couple of things, particularly in Compton, that I'm a little disappointed in. I believe, Andre, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you're the liaison as well. I don't know if you could talk about that on the show. There's a different thing, but I know there was a chance to have oversight over the sheriffs that didn't pass. I'm deeply disappointed in that because Compton could have led the way.
Mhm.
If any city needs it with the gangs that are in the sheriff's department, right? It's Compton. And I just don't have words. I don't know why it didn't pass because I'm like dumbfounded to this day. Like, we had this
I have,
opportunity. Do you want to say
yeah,
something about that?
I have to, I have to 100% agree with you on that.
Right.
That was a missed opportunity. I feel,
A miss. I
but
mean, it. I'm going to be honest. It's going to lead to less accountability. It's going to lead to more people, more Black boys and brown kids dying, and not just dying, but not having not having the evidence released, not having true justice. Criminal justice doesn't exist. We don't have justice, and so I just, I want to say this. Like, I was disappointed in that, and I don't
we
want
will
to
have
say
a chance to bring it back.
okay, that's good.
So,
The other thing that I'm disappointed at is the situation with the school police in Compton. I want to shout out the movement in Compton right now, the kids that are so brave that are fighting, and I want to shout out the, sorry to say this, the ineptness of the school board who's not addressing their concerns, who's like laughing in their face and not doing. It's just the truth. I talk to the kids. I listen to the kids. I don't listen to propaganda, and that's what they're telling me, and I believe them. I think it's completely unjust that I hear that the police in Compton have access to semi-automatic assault rifles. I've heard so many students of the students being intimidated. These are great students. It doesn't even matter if they're 4.0 students. I mean, no student should be intimidated. in my own experience in Watts, I saw students being taken in a police car away. Like there should never be police in school. So I'm for the complete removal of police in schools. So I want to just say that's the first thing I want to start by saying in terms of criminal justice. You know, I want to say that I've heard, not going to say any names, I've heard of ICE interacting with school police in terms of our Latino kids, and that's also completely wrong. That's completely wrong as well. Um, the other thing I want to talk about just holistically in criminal justice, okay, at the state level, I'm going to try to be quick because this is something I'm really passionate about. It's why I got into this. Because of the, racism was my whole issue why I got into this. So at the state level right now, we still put a lot of our budget into incarceration and policing. That's the truth. Compared to healthcare, education, environment, it's very minimal. Even this year with COVID, we didn't cut incarceration. You know what we cut? Schools, healthcare, environmental regulations, right? And that's why during a pandemic, we are ironically, but it's not so ironic, having this worldwide movement because we didn't cut our police.
Right.
We didn't cut
Right.
our incarceration budget. We cut other things. And do you think it's by surprise that people are dying from the pandemic, yet our Black boys are getting shot? No, it's not. Our budget right now is not a moral budget. It does not value our Black and Brown communities, period. Right. So, what I want to develop, right, and put pressure on the legislative development when I get there, and if not, honestly, go to the media and call them out and get them voted out, is a decarceration budget. I am radical in the sense that I believe in abolition. I don't think prisons like we have a role in our state or in the world. There are other sorts of ways to hold people accountable, right? So I believe in a decarceration budget. I would eventually shift our budget away, from this incarceration and investing in that and putting it into housing, healthcare, education. Because you know what, Andre? It is cheaper. I've said this so many times. People have asked me about criminal justice. It is cheaper. And to the Republicans out there, to the independents, it is more fiscally responsible for our state. It saves our state money, and it's more humane to house someone, to make sure they can go to college, to make sure they go to a good school, to make sure they have good food, than it is to hold someone in prison. It is cheaper for our state and is more humane. So I want to work on that. I want to just mention a couple more things. We still have folks on death row that are costing our state millions of dollars. I don't believe in the death penalty. I don't believe in death row. And guess what? It's Black and brown men on death row right now, right? That's
Right.
not good in a pandemic, but that's just inhumane and it's wasting our state money. Fine, if you think it's humane, okay, but it's wasting our state money. So it's not a good idea all around. We also haven't abolished the death penalty. That's something I want to do permanently. The last thing I want to mention is SB 731. We had a bill in the state assembly, Andreas, SB 731, that would have ended qualified immunity. Okay, so what does that mean, right? That means that it would have held police unions accountable, right? So when a shooting happens, the police officer, we're not saying, okay, he's the bad guy, but we're saying, you know what, we're going to have justice and investigate this as if another crime occurred. Right now, a police officer is protected in an abnormal, unethical, immoral way, and there's no justice given to boys that are killed, right? There's none. We had a bill that could have done that. I'm going to say this, not that I'm trying to bash my point. It's what happened. Black Lives Matter had an action against Gibson for this, okay? He stalled. He stalled to the last minute. And right when he knew the bill wasn't going to go on the floor, he's like, oh, I support it. I stand with you, family. That's not courage. Courage is saying there's this great bill, fight for it. And with people up in Sacramento, not me, who are co-sponsoring this bill, because he might try to spin lies. He went on a show and tried to spin lies. This is when people sponsoring the bills, Andre. It's not even my words. They told me, the youth told me, the lawyers advocating for this told me he was stalling the bill in committee. It was him. And I believe them partly because they're near the floor in Sacramento. I also believe them because Gibson takes the fifth or sixth most in police money. Fine, he's a former cop. He can't change that. I'm not blaming him for that. But you know what? You can reject that police union money. But he hasn't. And I've asked him to, and he hasn't.
Fatima, you have literally bounced all through my
Oh,
questions here.
because we can change,
So
honestly, the things you're
listen,
fighting for, the things you talk about on your show, the things that people on the streets for, the people in power could change it. I'm not trying to say it's imaginable.
that's
It's possible. Like, this is what laws do. The civil
hmm
rights movement. Well, how did black folks get the right to vote? How women get the right to vote? How did, I'll be honest, okay, sorry, I don't want to go too
so
much into
wait, let me
this,
let me
but
let me let me let me
it
backtrack a
just, it
little
makes
bit
me
because
angry,
you
not
you,
because it makes me just really angry, when I think about what can be done and
you
isn't. It does.
I know. So you tapped in a little bit into education, a little bit.
Mm.
Um, and I want to know what plans would you have to impact education in the 64th district in ways that maybe your opponent has not, or maybe has fallen short in certain areas as it relates to education. What ways will you step up?
Yeah, so when it comes to education, the ways I'm different than my opponent is the way I would fund, college, right? And the way I would fund our youngest kids. And so I believe in tuition free college. We've seen so much kids in Compton, kids in Watts, you know, I mean our district, Andre, has 11.7% college grad rate, right? I taught the kids in my school. They're some of the most brilliant kids. That's not the issue, right? The issue is lack of access, right?
Mhm.
And you go literally 15 minutes outside of our district, right? You go to Torrance, which is just outside, a little bit Gardena, nicer part of Long Beach, right?
Right.
15 minutes out. It's like more people have college degrees, and it's literally a lack of access and affordability. And so I want to make college tuition free, right? The same energy we put in our state and our cities into funding police. What if we put that same energy into funding education, right? Let's do that. Okay. And then in terms of our youngest kids, my son has autism. I know how we had insurance. Thank goodness we were able to get him therapy, and he's grown. But a lot of when I talk to a lot of the Best Start teachers in Best Start Compton, Willowbrook, right? These great programs who try to do so much,
Hmm.
there are limited resources in terms of they need aids, they need more tools to teach kids with special needs, kids that are gifted. They don't have that these private daycares have. So I want to really fully fund our state funded pre-K for those first 5 years of a child's life where like 85% of their brain is going. Now talking
Hmm.
about our middle and high school, right? What I want to do is equitably fund schools. So I want to make sure that right now the way our schools are is that we see our schools in our white communities, our more privileged communities, their parents can give to these ed funds that like really fund their schools, right? We have equal funding right now. We don't have equitable funding. What I want to do is look at the districts, look at the schools that are struggling the most, and give them more funding and resources. I know some of the teachers in the schools in Compton, right? And I've talked to them, and they tell me this. I'm going to talk about something else because I know there's an issue in Compton that's bothered me, and I'm not doing this to pander, but it's really troubled me that right now their teachers are going to school, and I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right that the school board is requiring them to do that. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I just think, right now we don't have a school board that's representing the students and teachers like they're supposed to be doing, which is their job. So one thing I want to do in state assembly too, honestly, Andre, I'm not there for political relationships. I'm there to hold the local officials accountable, right? So I want to do audits of the school board. How's the money being spent, right? Are they doing their job, and call them out when they're not? I don't think that's been happening right now by our current assembly member, right? It's more about political relationships with the superintendent, with the school board. It shouldn't be that way. It's about who's going to endorse who. It's not about that. You should want to be endorsed by the people and you should serve the people, and that's it, right?
Right.
So what you
Right.
lose a friend, do the work of representing the people. So that's something I would do is just do audits, hold them accountable, doing the right thing. I mean, the things I'm telling you now when I'm
Okay.
up there, I would say the same thing. Even if I'm in a
Yeah.
politician, I'd be like, yes, the school board's not doing its job. I'm going to get on the phone, call them, and I'm going to mobilize with Compton to get it done. That's what I would be saying, the same
Um,
thing. So,
we like that. We like that. Okay. So listen. Now, this next question comes from the community,
okay. Oh, I love that. Okay.
and it's in relates as relates to the police.
Right.
Currently, police personnel records are private. New York recently passed legislation that requires police officers to have personal liability insurance based on their personal or their personnel records. Would you be willing to support a legislation that requires law enforcement to have malpractice or liability insurance similar to doctors and lawyers?
Okay. So if I understand this correctly, they want to what this would do is basically if the police officer does something wrong, there would be insurance or some sort of system to protect them. Am I
So right
understanding?
now, so right now, as it
Right.
stands, when we sue the police department, technically we're suing ourselves because that money comes from the taxpayers. This question is asking, should New York is requiring their officers now to have liability insurance for their own personnel records.
Right. So they would have to
If
pay for their own.
to their own, so if they get if officer so and so beats up another Dalvin Price, now instead of Dalvin
Wait, oh, you got cut off, Andre. Say that
And
again. Now instead of what?
Dalvin Price suing the LA Sheriff Department, which in turn comes out of our pocket. He would be suing directly that officer and that officer's insurance company.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that the word public safety means that like we shouldn't be paying if they do something wrong, if an investigation is needed, right? I would wholeheartedly say that's something they should provide, for. It's not the public's fault if something happens or they do something wrong. So yeah, that's something I would support because I wouldn't want the public to pay for that. I mean, because I feel like it would prevent the public from even bringing up something, and that shouldn't, you should never have something that would be an impediment to seeking justice, right?
Um, this one is as it relates to homelessness and housing. All cities are under an unfunded man. Or I'm sorry, all cities are under an unfunded mandate to come up with an affordable housing and shelters. What type of state legislation would you support to help fund this unfunded mandate?
Yes. So we definitely need more affordable housing. In LA, we haven't built affordable housing, public housing since the 50s. I think it's a matter of investment. Like I'm going to come back to the fact that we haven't invested enough in public housing. So
Mhm.
we've had no issue building housing in the state. Unfortunately, the housing that's been built is not affordable. It's simple as that. We built luxury housing. We funded that, right? We funded hotels, right? I mean, if you go, I mean, we funded, we have no problem funding that, but we don't fund affordable housing that's truly affordable. So I think it's just making sure we allocate funds for that and solely that. We don't need to be building more luxury housing, right? We don't need our wealthy people to buy one more house. They don't need that, right? We need to really be going to the community and making sure we work with, our nonprofit organizations, right, to really fund affordable housing based on what Compton can afford, based on what Watts can afford. I know what happened in Watts recently was that they had affordable housing built, but the rent was raised, right? That shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be raised $200 for someone in Compton Watts. That's a lot of money. It is, and
Right.
I'm going to say it. Watts has had a displacement of Black people because of that sort of development happening where they built development that's really not for the community. So I would, yes, invest more
Mm.
in affordable housing, but I want to make sure that it's not just, without oversight because a lot of times when you give money, there's no oversight, it doesn't get done. So I want to make sure that we really work with the local city officials. We work with, you know, uh, good developers, good nonprofit developers, right, that aren't there to make a profit, but are really there to work with the community and hold them accountable to not raising the rent if they build this new housing, because that's an issue. I also don't believe in market rate housing for that issue because it's just simply we can't. Most people right now in California can't afford market rate housing. That's why people move out. So I believe in really looking at the community's income. The lowest paid member of the community, right, should be able to afford housing. And so yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now, um, Fatima, as you know, Hub Radio has been doing interviews like this for some time now to increase the voter turnout.
Yeah,
In the last election, the last runoff, we helped to increase the voter turnout by 62%.
that's awesome.
And a lot of those were first time voters. Now, for you and running for the 64th District Assembly, for a first time voter unfamiliar with you and your opponent, what factors should he or she consider in choosing between you or Mr. Gibson?
Good question, Andre. I want to congratulate your radio station and uplift it because, like, I've told you this personally, even out of the show, that we need to do everything we can to uplift anyone running. I want my opponent to come on the show. I'll say it on the record. I wish he'd come on and talk about what he stands for because we should have a fair, representation, and we shouldn't be. If we can't defend our record, what the heck are we doing there? I mean, if you're running away and you can't defend your record, why are we using our taxpayer money to pay you? Anyway, so that's something I would consider a voter to look at. I mean, are they willing to go on the record and defend what they have? And I think we've seen plenty of times where Gibson doesn't do that. He's multiple times. I mean, I think there's been at least a couple times where he's been asked to be on a forum with me and he hasn't shown up and I have, so it's been more like an interview. I don't need to name the people, involved in that, but that's happened. And I just think that's simply wrong. If I can't defend my record, I'll just walk right my way out of Sacramento and say, well, I don't deserve to be here. you know. So that's something people should think about. I think something else is that look at this, right? So a lot of politics has to do with money. It has to do with money, and that's sometimes a motivator for people. And I think something I want, because I think this is important because I don't know if a lot of Compton residents know about this pay to play system we have in politics. But a lot of times, the reason when you vote someone in and they don't represent you or vote on your behalf, or they don't vote for a bill, is because they have their lobbyists on speed dial, or they have their corporate funder on speed dial to say, how should I vote? They're not asking the community people, how should I vote on housing? How should I vote on this police bill? They're asking the police unions because they're funding them. They're asking the oil companies about how they should vote on environmental issues because that's funding them. They're asking the developers. And I think that's a huge issue. So one difference between me and Gibson is I don't have anyone to call, right? Except a community member, because I honestly don't take their money. I don't take, because he's attacked me on this, by the way, so I'm gonna bring it up. I don't take charter school money either. I don't take private school money. None of that. I've even said no when people wanted to donate who on a board of a charter school. So I've even given back donations on it because I don't want to be bought up by any special interest. I've returned like $1,000 that's handed to me, literally. You could see that in my ethics report. I've returned it because it was from someone who was a developer, and I didn't want to be even that to influence my decision making. And so that's the difference between me and Mr. Gibson, is that he is the second biggest acceptor of this special interest money. And we have a website, which I'm going to publicize right now, that you should have on your mailers, but it's mikegibsonsrecord.com. So if you go to that, it's not even something we made. We just kind of literally put the facts together. It's all cited. It basically just shows with evidence, because it's all public knowledge for Compton residents, for anyone, his records, his voting records, and his funding, which is all public knowledge. So if anyone's interested in seeing if I'm telling the truth, go to mikegibsonsrecord.com and you could check it out. So with me, I don't have any special interest. The other thing I think is that, I'm going to say it, we need more women up there. We need more women up there. We need more women of color up there. I'd be the first Muslim. I'd be adding to there's only 30% women up there right now. I'm a teacher. I think there's only like 2 teachers up there. You think about education, right? I know it's really important to Compton residents. If a teacher's up there, there's no way, right? She's gonna be fighting because my roots are, in the classroom. I also have a son who is autistic, so like I'm gonna be. It's my self interest to want the best for him. He goes to school in the district, so I'm gonna be thinking about the school. So I think that differentiates us. The other thing is I want to share, like, think if there's anything else. This is gonna sound simple. It just crossed my mind. I'll always make the right decision. That sounds like simple saying, but I will, because I don't have anyone else behind me besides my individual donors that have given me donations, and besides, the voters that have voted me in. So that's going to be my special interest there. You know what I mean? So that's
Got
what I'm
it.
thinking
Okay.
about. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to go through your opinion or your stance on some of these propositions, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
of course. They're so important. So thanks for asking about them.
Okay. And there's a couple that stand out for our community
Right. Right.
specifically. Let's talk about Proposition 16, and this would allow public colleges, universities, and agencies to include race, sex, color, ethnicity, and country of origin as a part of their decision-making process.
Mhm.
This would also allow to create affirmative action programs to increase diversity or help certain groups. What is your stance on Proposition 16?
Yes. So I would encourage everyone to vote yes on it. Um, it is so important, and it's much needed in our school system. It's much needed in our communities. I mean, I talked about the statistics, of in terms of how the lack of access, right, to our
Hmm.
Black and Brown children in our district. So I think it's important to take this into decision making, and I'll tell you why. It's about equity, right? Equality, because this is the argument, right? Equality and equity are 2 different things, right? Because the
Hmm.
argument is, oh, well, if someone applies for a job, if someone applies to a college, I'm going to just judge them fairly. I'm going to judge them by how they did in school, by, how they did their SATs. That would be fine if we lived in a country where everyone was born and had the same privileges. We don't, though, right? We live in a country where, a student from Watts may be their first in their family to go to college, right? A student from the community may be like the third in their family to go to college. A student from Watts, right, or Compton may have less money, right, to get tutors. A student from another wealthy community might. So that's why I think Prop 16 is so important. It takes into consideration to uplift and uplift those students and those people that are aren't given this, aren't starting right. There's this wonderful animation, if you've seen, aren't starting at the same starting line, right? They're not. And so I think it's so important to vote yes on it.
Okay. All right. Let's go Proposition 17.
Mhm.
This would allow people to register to vote in elections. I'm sorry, this would allow people on parole to register and vote in elections. Certain people on parole would now be allowed to also run for office.
Yeah.
What is your stance?
Vote yes. I want to go beyond this though. I want to not just let them to vote. I'm a bit radical in my stance on voting. I want to let people in prisons vote. I want to let our undocumented brothers and sisters vote in local elections because they're contributing to our economy. I also want to let 16 and 17-year-olds vote in local elections. And so I would say vote yes, but I would also want to go beyond that as a legislator and really acknowledge the fact that incarceration, right, is a form of voter suppression, right? I want to
Mm,
acknowledge the fact that um, we don't give immigrants a pathway to citizenship. The Democratic and the Republican Party have failed on this for so long, is a form of voter suppression, right? And so I want to, at least I want to allow them to vote in local elections. So yeah, I would vote yes and also go beyond that.
okay. All right. Measure 20.
Mm,
This is the crackdown on crime measure. This is a variety of policies
mm,
intended to make state laws tougher on crime, increasing penalties for certain theft crimes, harder on people to get out of prison on parole, requirements requires government to collect DNA samples from those convicted or suspected of a misdemeanor crime, not just felonies, and adds more to the list of violent crimes that disqualifies people in jail from early release.
yeah, no. I think it's clear that, so I don't mean to laugh at this one, but there, especially in a movement right now, that's, well, not just a move, this has been happening to Black people for a long time. Why would we want to do this? I'm sure this is very well funded by the police unions, though, right? I mean, would fill their pockets, but
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not. I think, in fact, we need a proposition that does the opposite. So, vote no on this one.
Okay. All right. Are you there still?
I'm here.
Okay. All right. So let's go. Let's go. Measure 21. Rent control includes more properties in rent control efforts. So
Yeah.
once units become 15 years old, they can fall under rent control. So by default, new units will be added every year
Hmm.
to rent
Yeah.
control.
Yeah. So I believe that we do need rent control. I do want to address it because there's a very passionate Compton resident that challenges me on rent control, and I'm glad she does. So I don't need to name her name, and I want to think a friend of mine, but I want to. I'm so glad if I can talk a little bit longer about this, just for like a minute extra, because it's important to me. This the reason, Andre, we need rent control is because of the failure of our legislators. And I want to just say that this isn't a fight against those small landlords. It's not. It's really not a fight against those small landlords. Because I know we have those in Compton too that are, their income is that rent check every year. So it's not to fight, but I know that they might suffer from this. But I guess the only reason I would kind of defend my vote for yes on this is it's tough. Like I think about how many people are on the streets or at the risk of being homeless in California. And I think that's why we need rent control. And I want to say it's a failure of our legislators. We could have passed state law that, wouldn't have such extreme policy if we just worked from the beginning on making sure we had affordable housing, for example, making sure we had enough mental health services and shelters. We wouldn't need to have such drastic rent control measures. But we've come to the point where, you know, people are on the streets, Andre. Like, and it's a public health crisis. And honestly, the homeless are getting criminalized. Like, they are, and people, in Compton especially, are one step away from like being kicked out of their house. And so right now, tenants have no rights. So I just want to say, I know this might hurt the smaller landlords, and I feel for them because this is not about them. It's to me, it's about though that to me, the priority right now is making sure that we house folks. And right now, folks aren't housed, and they're one step away from, being kicked out of their home. I don't think that's humane. So
Understood. Understood. I want to skip over to measure 24, the
mhm.
privacy law. expanding privacy laws. So this would create rights for online users to limit their sharing of data, triple fines on companies that violate that privacy, the privacy of kids. This also allows correction of inaccurate personal data, new penalties for privacy violations, and creates a $10 million agency to enforce these penalties. So are we supporting Measure 24? Are we supporting the privacy laws?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards yes. This is a tough one because it's investing a lot of money. Like I do think privacy is a huge issue. I mean, we see
Mm-hmm.
what happened in the elections, like with the Russian hacking and all this, and just what's happening with. If anyone's seen The Social Dilemma, there's a documentary.
Right. I
That's
just seen that.
that's scary, isn't it? I mean,
It
so our
is.
privacy is definitely at risk. That's a fact. So my only thing is like that we need a proposition to protect it. We should just be regulating these agencies more. So I'm leaning yes towards this. I just wish that it didn't take so much of our own money, right, to have to do this, right? You should just have stronger regulatory laws. I mean, you know what I
I
mean?
mean,
So, you know,
$10 million to fund the agency. That's almost like a
exactly.
drop in the
So that's
bucket.
my only
I,
like, you know,
I kind of think that's a drop in the bucket, though, personally, being that so many people are being uh,
right.
uh, like I log on Instagram every day, and I'm being advertised something that I really really want, but I really don't need, and it's all based off of these privacy laws here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I
so
vote yes. I'm just saying I wish we didn't have to spend money. It should have happened from the beginning. We shouldn't have let them have so much power, right, over our data.
that's
So
agreed. Agreed. Okay, last one.
okay.
Measure 25, abolishing cash bail.
This is a
So
controversial one.
this is the controversial one.
I
This changes the way people get out of jail while waiting for trial. So, what would happen? Most, not all, arrests for misdemeanors would be released within 12 hours. Also, those that are not released will have their risk evaluated by the courts, and the court will decide whether or not this individual should stay behind bars or not. Money no longer would matter in this case.
Okay.
Which,
So for this, I'm gonna flip the question. I'm gonna tell you my position on it. I'm not. I swear I'm not gonna change my position because it's how I voted. So but I want to. You're a black man, and I want to hear. I know the black community disproportionately suffers from cash bail and policing. And you don't have to tell me, but I want to first hear your view on it just for my own edification, and then I'll tell you my view on it.
okay, all right, no problem. So
Yeah,
listen, my thing is on this. Um, on surface, it sounds great
right,
to get rid of cash bail.
right, right,
That means I don't have to pay to get out of jail, right?
right.
But then it also means that this judge that likely may or may not fair towards people that look like me. Um,
Oh, Andre,
may
you went off audio.
decide,
Andre, you
all
went off.
right,
You went off
I
audio.
don't think this person decide. Yeah, I'm saying.
Oh no, no. So yeah, can you like say what you said about the judge because you went off audio that
Okay.
part? Okay.
So now the thing is, now if there's no cash bail, I'm just depending on this judge to decide if I should go home or not. And what is this judge basing that off of? Are they just looking at me right then in court? Are they looking at me in my county blues? Are they looking at me in my street clothes? Are they looking at me like a first time offender? Are they looking at me like a six-time offender? What are they looking at? What are the measurements? And since I don't understand the measurements as to what would allow that judge to let you go, and I just watched Meek Mill's documentary about his criminal justice situation and how his judge just constantly went after him, and it was more of a personal attack than it was just holding up justice. So in those types of situations, I would say, man, I want my money because I would rather just use the money to bail out and deal with the case later. Many times, Black people are locked up for something that they have not committed, and you're telling me that you're gonna take my right to just at least just pay my way out of this situation. I might have to go to work tomorrow. I might have to work over the weekend, and now I go to jail on a Thursday, and I can't get out. I can't see a judge till Monday could be the reason why I lose my job. Could be the reason why I might be homeless. Could be, so I'm looking at I personally say um I don't want this. I say no. I want to
Yeah.
keep it how it is.
I voted no as well. It's funny though, my husband voted differently, and like he had I'm gonna share his argument because I understood what he was saying too. Um, yeah, I stand by that because like I feel like we have Measure J on the ballot as well, right? In LA
Hmm.
County, which would kind of we can vote yes on. We have that. My husband brought up a good point though. He said like, if you think of the all of California, they don't have Measure J, and like cash bail has heard so many, right? So that's why he voted yes on it. I probably shouldn't say his vote on public media, but it's okay. But I personally voted no on it for kind of the same reason. Like I was like, well, if you don't have cash bail, it'll be replaced by something that will kind of stereotype and put more black people in jail, more brown people in jail. So that's why I voted no on it as well.
Yeah, I
But
just
I can see
that
cash
one
bail being an issue, a huge issue, right? So
that that could be very misleading.
yeah.
Very misleading. So yeah, okay. All right. Well, uh, that's all of our measures that I wanted to go over with you. Um,
Can I just plug in one measure that we didn't talk about that's like really important to me personally?
absolutely.
Okay, I have
Sure.
this because I'm a teacher. Prop 15 is also on the ballot. And it is
Hmm.
one of a kind proposition that's going to bring like millions of dollars back to our schools. I know Compton, one a big issue is the public schools. And so, I recommend voting yes on that, um, simply because it will bring more funding to schools. But not only that, my issue is also clean water, and Compton has an issue with that. Prop 15 will also fund for clean water. It will support local businesses. I know Compton has had businesses that are struggling. So I recommend voting yes on Prop 15. I needed to plug that in as a teacher. It's been just really important to me. It's
And
one way to
just
get
and
more.
just to be clear on Prop 15,
Right.
this tax would only go to
Thank
businesses
you.
or that have $3 million or more in
Yes.
commercial property. So
Yes.
it's not for everybody.
No.
It's not for
Thank you for
residential. It's
reminding
not
me.
for small
Yes.
businesses.
Yes, thank you for reminding me that because the ones that are saying vote no are saying that it's not going to affect small businesses. It's not going to affect your property tax. It's going to affect Google, Facebook.
Right.
Those are the companies that we should be taxing more anyway. And so that they were just going to take their money and put it into schools and communities. I think that sounds good to me. And so why not do that? So, well, yes, I recommend voting
I'm
yes.
I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks for clearing that up. So now, how do you feel about going into the election? The election is just a few days away. Today is Thursday. By the time people see this interview, it'll be Friday. You have Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday's election day. How are you
Oh
feeling?
my gosh. How do I feel? Oh my gosh. You never know what can happen in an election, whether it's the national election. Like, look, I'm gonna say we gotta get Trump out of office. I hope, I can find issues with the Democratic Party, but I hope people make the right decision. We gotta understand for marginalized communities, Biden will be so much better than Trump. He's not perfect, right? But please, please make the right decision. That I had to plug in our presidential race. Important. Uh, yes, vote for Biden and Kamala Harris, please. And then the other thing is, yeah, how do I feel about my own election? I honestly, Andrea, I am putting everything I can into this. I am working as hard as I can, and I'm a woman of faith too. So I believe that in our Muslim faith we say everything that is going to happen to you is written, right? Is already written. God already knows, and so I am hoping that I've done everything I needed to do to win this for the people.
Mhm.
I do, and I really hope I can win to show Compton and show Watts what really can be done when they're not sold out to these special interests. And I'm hoping that's what happens. So I'm trying, I'm not gonna lie, it's been hard to sleep the past few days. I'm just anxious about different things, but I'm trying to just rest in the fact that I'm doing everything I can. I have a great team that's doing everything they can. I have volunteers that are doing everything they can. I have people donating to me, that believe in me, that are helping these last few days. And so yeah, that's it. We're just gonna see what happens. I think we do have a good shot. I don't think Gibson would be attacking us with these mailers if we don't. So not to put that in, it's gotta. But I just have to say, like, I mean, right? If we weren't a threat, so uh, that didn't happen in the primary, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think we do have a good shot, and I want to just encourage. I hope everyone watching. I hope your vote is your choice, but I hope I've convinced you to vote for me, hopefully. And if you have any questions, like I want you to email me at Fatima@FatimaForAssembly.com. Make sure under when you posted you plug in my email and my website because I want folks to get in touch with me if they want to have any questions or anything like that. Yeah,
Yep.
but Thank you for having me on. And if you want to get involved these last few days, we need phone bankers. We need some grassroots donations. So go to fatimaforassembly.com and support us. And, yeah, if you believe in us. So
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Fatima, for taking the time again, for speaking with us. Good luck on this weekend and on Tuesday. And may the best person win.
yes, may the best person, and I appreciate that. All right. Thank you, Andre.